Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Carol Looper. I'm a member of the CMC Board of Trustees. I am outgoing Marketing Committee Chair and incoming Membership Committee Chair. So all of you who have red tags that say guest, please today change them to green tags. I'll be very proud to have all of our members now. We welcome you to CMC. Today's CMC Forum, the Modern University, is sponsored by Ology and Accenture, each represented here by many friends and associates. Please help me thank them. Now please help me welcome William Faust, Managing Partner at Ology. He will introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Carol, and thanks to CMC for hosting this important conversation and many important conversations at Ology, where most of our business is with higher education institutions. We can think of no more important topic, especially today. So we're very grateful for that. I'm going to be brief, but I will relate that this week I was telling somebody that I was going to have the opportunity to introduce Gordon Gee in Columbus. And they looked at me and they said, "Isn't that like introducing Elvis in Memphis?" And I said, kind of. I mean, he has his own bobblehead. It was here a few minutes ago, and now it's missing. So what I thought I'd do, the man that really doesn't really need an introduction in Columbus, I thought I would point out a few things you may not know. Number one, he just launched a new book on the land-grant university, which I'm sure is going to come up today, and it's something that we covet at the office and draw from all the time. He also has had recently a 3-year contract extension from West Virginia University. So probably the only way you'll see him in Columbus is in an event like this for the next couple of years anyway. And then finally, he was rated #1 college president, and I want to make sure I get this source correct, by Great Value College's website. So again, no introduction needed, but president of West Virginia University, E. Gordon Gee. And Dr. Gee is going to speak for a few minutes, but then we have the pleasure also of Herb Asher, Professor Emeritus from Ohio State University in Political Science, who's going to lead us in a bigger conversation after Dr. Gee gives his opening remarks. So please welcome Herb Asher.
Well, thank you very much. You know, Elvis is dead. So just start calling me Lazarus. How does that sound? If that is true. And Herb asked me, what happened to my finger? I broke my finger patting myself on the back. But anyway, it's great to be well. I love Columbus. Yeah. Love this place. Because I spent 5 years in West Virginia from 1985, and then I've been back there for 5 years. I tell everyone I'm a Buccaneer. Have you figured that one out yet? So that's great. And Ology has done a great job for us. They totally rebranded. They got rid of maize and blue and made it old gold and blue, and that was something that we greatly appreciate. So that was terrific. So Herb, you don't mind? Herb knows that I do this. Frequently, because one of the things that I do is I do get a lot of emails, and so I thought in the tradition that I have had when I was here before, I thought I'd just give you a couple of the most recent, just because they're kind of fun. And I answer every one of them. This one came in this week. Dear Dr. Gee, thanks so much for the flowers you sent on the occasion of my business expansion as a West Virginia University alumnus. I appreciate the thought. However, I must tell you that the card accompanying the flowers said "Rest in peace." There must have been some mistake, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. So when I got that one, I thought, oh no, what's going on? So finally I wrote back, "Dear George, oh my, that means that somewhere there's a funeral taking place today with flowers and a note saying, congratulations on your new location." So there we go. There we go. This one I love. Look at this one. You have to see. See, this one I thought was very funny. Dear Professor, dear President Gee, thank you. This is from a third grader. I was reading to a third grader recently, and third grader. Dear President Gee, thank you for coming to our school. I liked your bow tie. What does it feel like to be president of West Virginia University? Does it feel good or bad? Depends on the day, but I like you. When will you retire? I'm not saying this because I don't like you. I'm just curious, he said. So, but this is my favorite, and then I'm going to get back to the business of the business here, which is, I go visit the students every, I go out on the evenings. Tracy Stuck is here. She knows that I've been seen in strange places like Papa Joe's. But anyway, this one came from a father. He said, you delighted my son on move-in day by stopping by his room to welcome him personally to West Virginia University and to give him a cookie. After seeing him during Christmas, I just had to write to let, I'm sorry, this one was very funny. I just had to write to let you know how well he is integrating into West Virginia University life. He met a girl, made the dean's list, is writing for a student newspaper, joined the debate club, became a research assistant, took up polo, and is editor-in-chief of the new Undergraduate Research Journal. Wow, we cannot believe that this is the same kid who refused to go to band camp in the 7th grade. So I didn't know how to respond, so I finally sat back. This is to Michelle. Dear Michelle, what a thrill that your son is making the most of his opportunities here. I'm fairly certain that no one student could be that involved, and come to think of it, we do not even have a polo team at West Virginia University. You aren't making your tuition checks out to cash, are you? So anyway, it's great. It's great to be back. It's great to be back. So really, what's more important to the two of us is the fact that we want to get you to ask us questions. So what I thought I would do here is I'll talk just quickly about the university. And I'm going to do a lightning round. I'm going to do about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 things that I think we ought to all be thinking about. But as you know, this is now my 39th year as university president. I know I don't look it, but it is. So I've been a university president for 4 decades, going into my 5th decade next year, and the world is really upside down. It has changed rather dramatically. So when I became a president of a university in 1980, about 95% of the American public thought universities were important. It's now below 50%, if you think about that. And so that deterioration has really caused a lot of dilemma for all of us who run them. So, and the reason for that, there's a loss of public trust. College costs too much, people say. Diminishing state support. When I started here, Herb, we had about 60% in 1990, and now it was down to 8% when I left. I obviously was a very effective president, but anyway, well, I blame Joe Ludo for that. Intentional competition, changing demographics. Then always there's the question: does college cost too much? So what I thought I'd do is I would just raise some of the issues that I think are my observations after 40 years about some of the issues that really affect what I call the modern university. And I'm going to do these very quickly because I think that, as I call it, it's a lightning round. So my first observation is that bureaucracy kills. So why do we not kill your bureaucracy in universities? I point out that there are 4 levels of bureaucracy that we face in universities. We face the federal, we face the state. Our trustees are sometimes a little bureaucratic, but the greatest bureaucracy we face is ourselves. We're our own worst enemy. I'll give an example. At West Virginia, I had an opportunity right when I was there. One day, my assistant came in. She said, you need to take a driver's test. I'm not a very good driver. I said, I'm not taking a driver's test. And then she said, you need to. And finally I said, why? Now this is one of the privileges of being university president. Finally I discovered that the reason I had to take a driver's test, and we had 30,000 employees, most of them were taking driver's tests. Well, you can think of the cost of that, was because some individual somewhere in the bureaucracy decided they could save $10,000 on insurance. That is the problem with universities. We've become too bureaucratic. Strategic planning is a myth. Let me just say that again. Strategic planning is a myth. The faster you can get rid of it, the faster you can start making progress. We've got to move from strategic planning in universities to strategic action. The world is moving just too fast. We've got to stop organizing our teaching and learning functions for obsolescence. Think about this. Let's go out 20 years and think what the world is going to look like, and then we have to re-engineer and come back, because in 10 to 15 years, if they are right about AI, 80% of the jobs we're training people for are going to disappear. And if that's the case, then we really have to start learning to peer around corners. And the faster that we can do that, the better off we are. And there, we have to. we have to get rid of the three tyrannies, I call it. The tyranny of the college, the tyranny of the department, and the tyranny of gerontology. Now, I have a right to say that. I'm 75, and old people should not be running universities. And the reason I say that is the fact that those above 50 in universities want the world to be the way that it was. They look to the rearview mirror. Those below 40 understand that the world has changed, and they want it to be much different. But unfortunately, it's the old people who make the young people cynical. We have to face that reality. On the other hand, we must be wary of the tyranny of the trendy. We get caught up in trends. All of us do, but very often it has a negative impact. Think about MOOCs. We said MOOCs 3 or 4 years ago. We're going to destroy universities. We're all going to become the clique institutions. Well, MOOCs have disappeared, and we haven't. And so we need to be very careful of the trends. We must remember that culture overpowers talent. Universities are made up of very talented people, but our talent is often misused because universities very often have toxic cultures. We have this difficult brew combining arrogance and complacency. Unless we change that immediately, we're going to really have some challenges. Some of you have heard me use this before, but I love the example of how we talk in a university. We talk about, think about this, the language of university. We talk about teaching loads as if teaching is a load, and we talk about research opportunities. That in and of itself gives you some signal about the cultural issues that we face. So whatever happened to free speech on a university campus? Huh? We need to talk about that, and Herb and I are going to talk about that. How do we address the Bermuda Triangle of issues marked by the external funding addiction that we have in the STEM fields, the obsequious scientism that we find in the liberal arts, and then and in the social sciences, and then, of course, the ideological doctrines and science envy that occurs in the humanities. And as part of that, how do we stem the tide of the shifting of the burden, I put that in quotes, of teaching from faculty members to adjuncts members and graduate students? How do we as a university make certain that we are not hijacked by the relentless pursuit of money and prestige, including chasing rankings that we know are deeply flawed at the expense of genuine educational excellence? I will say this until I get out of one of these jobs, and the greatest and most pernicious undermining of higher education in the recent past has occurred because of those damn U.S. News rankings. They have totally skewed the way that we think about universities. And then I'll leave the most controversial idea to the end, if that's all right, and that is, how do we as universities address the lopsided political ideology of the faculty in certain areas, especially the humanities and social sciences, creating a homogeneity of thought in which people are really talking about the fact that we need to be the champions of difference and diversity and tolerance. It does not exist in many instances, and we need to address that. So, Herb, what my view is the fact that we need to return to the basic premise of what the liberal arts are about, and that is about teaching and learning. That is about students. That is, in this instance, it's about the state of Ohio. It's about 11.6 million Ohioans. We need to return to the basics of what universities were founded for, and move away from many of the kind of issues that we're dealing with right now. So, my friend, that's where I am. I'm not controversial at all, but I just decide I haven't said anything about the Little Sisters of the Poor. I want you to know that right now. So, but I can if you want me to. And I love Notre Dame. I just want to make that point.
The Little Sisters was to be my last question, framed as, how did you become the #1 fundraiser for the Little Sisters of the Poor? But we'll leave that for...
It's pretty damn easy. I crawled there on my hands and knees. I had no idea there was a Little Sisters of the Poor. There you go.
We'll tell that story. But first of all, there's a couple of questions here that... but let's start talking about the arts and sciences. You brought that up. And I'm hearing more and more concern about the future of the arts and sciences, and particularly the arts, the humanities, and the social sciences, not only at major public universities, what are the opportunities there, but also some of our very good small liberal arts colleges. What are their futures? I mean, and we're hearing more and more today, as you were mentioning, about science, engineering, STEM, and all of that. We're hearing more and more about, well, you need to have a practical education so you can get a job. And when people talk that way, they oftentimes seem to be slighting the arts and sciences. And I think if you look at a number of universities, including Ohio State, in the last couple of years, you'll see, declines in the number of faculty in many of the arts and sciences department. You mentioned more teaching being done not by faculty but by other means or whatever. So tell us about.
Well, I think that, as you remember, about 6 years ago, I chaired a commission for the American Council on Education on the future of the American university. It was readily apparent to me then that the small tuition-driven institutions are not going to survive. And the reason is the fact they have all replicated each other. The only way an institution, I think, that is small is going to survive is how they differentiate themselves. They need to be different. If it's one size fits all, if it's that we have a bunch of McDonald's hamburger stands out there all producing the same kind of hamburgers, they're going to have difficulty. In terms of the big universities, of which I am more familiar, I actually believe that there's an opportunity for a renaissance in terms of the arts and the liberal arts. And the reason for this is the fact that if I'm correct about what is going to happen out there, the one thing, and that is in terms of jobs disappearing, the one thing that is not going to disappear is the ability to be able to think and write and read what other people are talking about. Those are the fundamental basis of what I think is a good education. Now, one of the problems we have is the fact that we've gotten so jargon infused, we've gotten outside of our role in terms of the liberal arts many times, in which we do not really teach such issues that are fundamental to what that's about. So I think there is an opportunity for a real renaissance if changes will be made in those who have responsibility in that area.
Okay, you mentioned also, you didn't use the term, but political correctness, I think, was what you really were talking about. That's been happening on campus, and we've heard terms like trigger warnings and safe spaces, and at times, people who don't like higher education that much in the first place use that as sort of a lever in which to attack the university. But how do you view the situation?
Well,
I mean, is it serious? Is it overblown? What can you do about it?
I think it's serious. I tell you what you can do about it, and that is the fact that I believe that any institution that does not allow people with ideas to come on their campus cannot call themselves an institution any longer. A university, I believe that universities are places of good ideas, bad ideas, obnoxious ideas, interesting ideas. The marketplace will prevail, but the minute you prevent those kind of discussions taking place, universities are the last safe space for ideas. And when we I'm sorry, you got me on a roll right now. But when we start having trigger warnings and safe spaces, and we say this person is acceptable, that person is not acceptable, and people are out there protesting. Protesting is one thing, but prevention is another. And the one thing that is absolutely essential for the future of our country and our democracy is the ability to be able to speak up and speak out. And universities have lost a lot of opportunity in that regard to set a standard. The University of Chicago put out a statement about that, which I fully subscribe to, but a lot of institutions have allowed that to deteriorate on their campuses and are losing their ability to be able to lead.
You also
I don't feel strongly about it, Herb.
You also mentioned about affordability, and I think actually, Ohio State, this is a little plug, but Ohio State really has a good story to tell over the years, but still out there, when you hear, for example, the presidential primary campaign that's going on right now, many of the candidates have proposals for free tuition, free college, free community college. I mean, a whole variety of different things. But what are your views about what should universities be doing to enhance affordability?
Well, first of all, I think there is a great story at Ohio State, particularly for those 14 years I was there. Just kidding you, but I think that I think we all agree that the real challenge for universities is this: how do you increase quality and how do you decrease costs? I know as university president, I can increase quality. Just give me lots of money, but that is no longer available. Our legislatures are not going to give us, they're unreliable partners. If you're in the private sector, you've cashed yourselves out of opportunities. And so the question for the American university is, how do you increase costs? Or how do you increase quality with decreasing costs? That means you're going to have to make fundamental decisions. The other thing is, and something that we did, Joe is here, others, as we asked the question, what's the core mission of the university? Teaching and learning. So why are we in the parking business? Why are we in X, Y, and Z? Let's use those as monetization for opportunities to invest in the core. Affordability is absolutely essential, because if people believe that they cannot afford to go to college, they're going to head in different directions. Now, that is not a plug, because I think that education is a pre-K through life issue. In the small state of West Virginia, there are 20,000 jobs available for which we don't have skilled workers. Those are electricians and plumbers and a variety of other things. Universities are not for everyone, but education is for everyone, and so we need to make certain that that is available and affordable. As to the proposals of free college tuition for everyone, there is no freedom in that. That is not viable in my view, because of the fact that the cost would just be overpowering. What we have to do is we have to think about maybe free tuition for community colleges to get people into college, and to make certain, or into some trainings to make certain they're doing well. But this notion of free college, they do that in Europe, they do that in Japan, a couple of places, and what has happened is their institutions have become amalgamated. The great strength of the American university is the fact there's large and small, and public and private, and Catholic and Mormon, and I think that is the strength of our institutions.
In recent months and years, there have been revelations of major scandals on college campuses: sexual abuse of students and/or minors at Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State, a major academic scandal at the University of North Carolina, and most recently, admission scandals at the University of Southern California and at many Ivy League institutions. What's going on? What is there about institutions of higher education that allows these things to happen and to go on so long uncovered and unreported?
Well, I certainly have some responsibility for that in terms of Ohio State, because of Dr. Strauss, who was there on my watch, unaware of it. I was interviewed about it, but unaware of it. But that is no excuse, and we always have to be concerned about the victims. I think that we don't spend enough time in universities thinking about how do we really discipline ourselves. The president of Penn State was a great friend of mine. I remember talking to him about the Penn State situation. He said he remembered sort of a conversation. Someone came in and said, "We've got a problem in the showers, and by the way, we need $50 million for a new stadium," so they go off and talk about the stadium. I think that at least the role of the university president is a very changing role, in the sense that we need to start asking, what do you mean there was a problem? In other words, the issue is always ask the second question. And I've given myself that charge. So when someone comes in and said, "We've got a problem," I don't say, "How interesting." I say, "What do you mean? And what are we doing about it? Who's in charge of it?" A variety of other things. So I think that is the lesson that I have learned from all of this. But again, you have to understand, these are very complex institutions. And so the second part of it, and I was asked by someone from the press, the second part of it is the fact that you need to have a culture of compliance. And that's one of the things I talked about in my lightning round, is the fact that we have a culture of complacency very often, and we are not really focused on doing the right thing. We're focused on doing the right thing for the individual that is in charge of something, rather than the other way around.
What about the future of Greek life, fraternities and sororities? I know you're a supporter of fraternities, but I've also heard you be a harsh critic using terms like tough love. Do fraternities and sororities have a place at the modern university?
Well, I think that they do. And what I believe, though, is the fact that we do need to hold them to a very high standard. So at West Virginia University, we have quite a large group of fraternities and sororities. Only about 8 or 10% of our students are members, but nonetheless, that's a significant population. But what you start to see is out of bounds drinking, a variety of other things, and so I just decided that I was going to develop a set of standards that, and I would develop it with the students because I think that was important, and we would hold these fraternities, these standards. If they didn't want to, then they'd have to dissolve themselves or become independent, and I think that their role is an important one in terms of philanthropy, in terms of camaraderie, in terms of school spirit, a variety of other things. You know, institutions that throw people out for making mistakes are not institutions that really, I think, are teaching institutions. They're punishing institutions. What we need to do is as universities, we need to listen very closely to our young people. A Vanderbilt example in this regard, which is Vanderbilt had about 50% of its students were members of Greek life, and they had, and when I came, I got all these emails about, gee, you know, you're punishing the students, the university is being very, very tough, a variety of other things. And so I called in the student leaders, both of the student government and of the fraternity sorority. I said, what's the problem? And they said, well, the university is just not working with us. So I said, well, you devise a system. This is a small campus of 5,000 undergraduates. And I said, well, you devise a system, and I'll look the other way if you'll just enforce it, because of the fact that I felt that having students take responsibility and act like adults was better. The end result was the fact that they created a system, they enforced it. Their system, by the way, was tougher than the universities, but it was theirs. We have to start thinking about these 18 and 19-year-olds as young adults who are going to make mistakes, but don't treat them like kids. Treat them as if they are part of the learning system. And when we do that, we're going to be have a lot more success in universities.
We're going to be moving to audience questions in a few minutes, so anybody who might want to ask a question, please start lining up at the microphone, and I'll ask a few more questions, and then I will turn to the people who are asking questions. And if nobody lines up, I know 5 names I'm going to call on. So, Gordon, let me ask you a question. This really, it sort of relates very much to you. What is the place and possibility for humor and spontaneity in a social media age in which everything goes virally, instantly, and without context?
Yeah.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
I don't probably.
Yeah.
And all I think of here is a press conference dealing with the football program, and a reporter asked you, "Did you ever think about firing Jim Tressel?" And you quipped, "I was worried he's going to fire me." And everybody in that room knew it was a joke. Everybody knew it was a way to relieve the tension in the room. But when I got a call from friends in California who had seen it online, OSU president afraid of being fired by football coach, that to me was one of the best examples of how the world has changed for all of us in terms of this. So
well, eventually it happened. So there was some truth to that.
That was not rehearsed.
This is the way I view the world. I think that the 3 ingredients for success of a university president are these. One is that you have to have a very thick skin. Secondly of all, you have to have a great sense of humor, and third, you have to have nerves like sewer pipes. And the humor side of it is very important. I would not have been able to survive in this intense world unless I made fun of myself, unless I had a good opportunity to talk with others and to do it with humor. And the fact in this country that we've lost our sense of humor is a damn tragedy. We've got to start lightening up, folks. And you know, the minute you're afraid to get up and say anything that is semi-humorous, that you're going to offend someone, that I think is an American tragedy. You know, our country. I've just been reading about George Washington, one of the great books on Washington. Even Washington had a sense of humor, the great Sphinx. So if he could, I can too. There you go, as a matter of fact.
As you look back on your Ohio State presidencies, what are some of the accomplishments that you feel most proud of or most significant?
Well, you know, because I had 2 terms. Yeah. I came back the second term to correct all the mistakes I made the first time around. But I think that during the first term, I think a couple of things, and Herb was with me during both terms, so we can talk about this. I think a couple of things. One is we moved from open admission to selective admissions. I think that was very important because our admission policy when I came was you all come. And then you'll all flunk out or something like that, you know, and it was a waste of time and money, and we did move. And I remember, one of the things that I remember very well, I'll just say this, a point of pride. Everyone in the early 1990s talked about Miami University, the public guy, a great institution. I will not denigrate it at all, but he knows where I'm going. And so they would get, out of the 10 students we admit and that they admit, they would get 9 out of 10, and their admission standards are much higher. Well, in 2014 when I left, our admission standards at Ohio State were much higher, and we would get 9 out of 10. And I think that was a positive. I think that the second thing happened on the first day, and you can remember this. That damn Jack Kessler, he's right out here somewhere. I see him, so when he recruited me, he was the chairman of the recruitment committee. They'd bring me in off of Olentangy. I thought, well, this is a nice campus. And then, so I drove my first day, drove my first day from Bexley, from the University of Residence, and I drove along Fourth. I thought I was in Fallujah. I mean, it was hand-to-hand combat to even get into the campus. And so I said, I called that meeting. I said, we have sucked the life out of our campus and our community. Well, that doesn't matter. You know, everyone said, well, this is the campus. We're going to be all right. The truth of the matter is we had to change that. So in about my first week, we started Campus Partners. That was, I think, one of the most important things that we did, because we changed the culture of this city with Campus Partners in many ways. In my second term, you know, I think that really focusing on the quality of the undergraduates. A lot of people did not think that was wise, but we totally renovated our campus. I think that it's become a wonderful place where we're requiring the first and second year students to live on campus. One of the surprising things you might hear is the fact that the executive vice president of Kroger's, they were going to tear down that Kroger's on 5th, you know. I mean, it was an awful thing. You go in there and you had to wear a flak vest. It was just horrible. And so you go in there, and they were going to tear it down. And so I persuaded them to build that new Kroger's right up against the street. And that was the catalyst for closing the gap between the short north and the university. And if there's anything that I take pride in, is building a store. But there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Now let us turn to questions. Please identify yourself, and as we remind people, questions are questions. They end with a question mark. And
remember civility.
Kimberly Gibson with IC 3D printers. It's great to have you back in town, by the way, and to see Dr. Asher there next to you. The University of Oxford, across the pond, just last week announced a £150 million investment in the humanities, which they are touting as the largest single donation to the university since the Renaissance. Okay, just to frame that up. through history.
They should have had better fundraisers. That's unbelievable.
I think you need to go over there, but
Yeah,
anyway. My question is about the advancement of AI, which you already talked about, and the challenges between the ethics, religion, and the importance of the humanities in this moment in our civilization, and what a university can do, not just from fundraising, but to really get a handle on that, and how government can be a partner in that.
Well, first of all, I'm going to come back to what I said. I think that there is the potential of a renaissance in terms of the liberal arts, the arts and humanities. I believe, for example, the arts. One of the things that I enjoyed most about my time at Ohio State is I love that Wexner Center. I mean, it was the soul of the campus in many ways, and I believe the arts are the soul of our human well-being. I really do believe that. The question is this: are they important? Yes. And so, how do we make certain they're important? And that is, in many ways, up to universities to return to the role of the humanities and the arts. As I said, we've gotten so jargon-laden, we've gotten so out of bounds in terms of some of the research and writing. We're killing a hell of a lot of trees that no one's reading. We've got to get back to the business of that notion of a humanistic education. And if we do that, I think that they'll not only survive, but I think that they'll thrive. But when we get into the politics of the humanities, that's when we lose the cause and the case.
Next question.
My name's David Millenthal, embarrassing husband of Bonnie Millenthal. She's embarrassed about me, but I've known you a long time, and so has Bonnie. But I recently wrote a column for Business First that expressed my view that it was time that the universities got out of the governing business of sports, the governing business. And would it be possible for universities to sponsor sports rather than to govern it? And I also talked to many people that indicated you could sell the Ohio State University brand in sports and their access to all the facilities for well over $1 billion to a rich person who wants to get rich doing what I perceive as still professional sports. So my question about all of this is, if you sponsor sports and you let people use it, I've talked to a lot of people and other presidents, including yourself, that not only is sports a distraction, I understand it attracts people, but it's a destruction. It's frankly been an element of, I wouldn't call it destruction, but let's just say an element of your history. So my question is it time for college sports to get out of the governing business of sports and all the scandals associated to it, sponsor the sports, and would that be a better idea, and a lack of a distraction that I think is destroying the academic fiber of the universities?
Well, you're talking about professionalizing college sports. Is that right, David? I think that's
well, I think it is professionalized.
Well,
but that isn't my question. My question is it time to get out of governing sports?
Well,
it's okay to present sports, but the governing seems to be where you guys get in a lot of trouble.
Well, yeah, there's truth to that. I think that, of course, part of the problem, and I could give a very extended answer about this. The NCAA is a mess. And I say that with a lot of affection because Mark Emmert, who's the president of the NCAA, was my assistant at Colorado for 5 years, and so I have a lot of respect for him. But saying that, what we've done is we have not developed the kind of simplicity and the type of agility that we should have in any kind of a governance structure. So we get caught up in the minutia and not in the big issues. For example, the fact that they could let the University of North Carolina not have any kind of penalty when they had that huge academic scandal associated with athletics is really unbelievable to me and to most presidents. But the reason is that they said, well, we're not in the business of governing that aspect of the university. Well, I think all of that leads me to believe that we've got to have a major restructuring. Now, I love college athletics. I obviously was a fullback. No, just kidding. I'm so damn short that someone asked. This is literally the truth. I ran into someone the other day and said, "Are you the president of West Virginia University?" I said, "Yes," and they said, "You can't be. You're so short." So anyway, but the answer is that we have to reform what we're doing because we've gotten into the minutia and not into the big things. Yes, sir.
Thank you, President Ncaa. My name is Joe Campbell. I work in Ohio State School of Environment and Natural Resources. And you talked about bringing in more humanistic ideas into research and learning. And I'm wondering, how does that match with the traditional hierarchies in research and learning? How do you blend both the humanistic side in terms of collaboration and partnering and what is a very hierarchical, traditionally, institution?
Well, first of all, universities are broken in the way they're organized. They should be organized, they're organized vertically. That's the reason I said there's the tyranny of the department, there's the tyranny of the college. My favorite example is that you hire someone young like you, coming in, and you want to come to a great university like Ohio State because you want to have conversations with physicians and with physicists and a variety of other people. And what ends up, though, is the fact that some old guy like me says to you, "Hey, listen, that's all well and good, but you're not going to get tenure under my watch." So number one is the fact that we've got to reorganize universities. We've got to move from colleges and departments to centers, institutes, and working groups. Then we organize around the way we think. The second thing is we have to have multiple roads to salvation. This notion of you can be good in teaching, good in research, and maybe good in public service, the real answer is that everyone knows that research counts and nothing else. And so what we now need to do is we now need to start creating pathways for people with great talents to be able to be recognized for those talents and to be paid and to be understood for those talents. And the minute when we do that, then we're going to have really a university. Our institution, our university has teaching professors. Their job is to teach. And when we moved into the R1 status, which is the major research status, because there was good teaching, allowing those who really could do research to do their research, so everyone wins. I always use the example about the fact that when I was at the University of Colorado, Tom Cech won the Nobel Prize, and the day after I was meeting with a group of humanists. And he said, "Of course Tom Cech won the Nobel Prize. That's because you gave all the money to physics." The whole point being is the fact that we all make up a university. A university is a mosaic, and until we make it into a real mosaic in which everyone is contributing, universities are connected only by a heating plant or by a telephone line. And that is the tragedy of the American university.
Good afternoon, Almar Walter with the City of Columbus. I appreciate your sentiments surrounding cultural issues in higher education. Before working with the city, I worked at 2 institutions of higher education at the directorate in numerous diversity offices. A former mentor of mine, who was also a college president, said something I'll never forget, and it resonated with some of the remarks that you made today, Dr. Ncaa. He said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And so with the enormous amount of time, money, and resources that we spend in strategic planning processes, from your perspective, how do we move through all of the aforementioned cultural issues in higher education to what you described as strategic action? So how do we get from all of the planning pieces, and by the time we finish the planning pieces and we move to action, most of the plan is outdated. How do we get to strategic action? Yeah,
universities are elephants, and they've got to become ballerinas, number one, and I think that that's enormously important. So speed in universities is absolutely critical. Number two is that we've got to recognize that unless we get the culture right, and by that I spend a lot of time on culture. I really think that that's much more important. And how do you do that? Well, as university president, I call up people, I recruit, I call them in and say, why are you leaving, why are you staying? We work on all sorts of ways to recognize and institutionalize the notion of being kind and thoughtful and getting rid of the kind of sharp edge that we have. It's hard in a big institution, but it has to start somewhere. It has to start with the president of the university. In this instance, I tell our football coach, winning doesn't start with him, it starts with me. Unless I am doing my work and believe in him and believe in what he's doing, then he's not going to be successful. Of course, I did tell our coach, we have a brand new one, that I'm going to the Big 12 championship this year, and I hope our team is coming with me. So I'm not that kind, okay? I think that.
Please.
Fred Looper, Niedenthal, and Logan. President Ncaa, I want to talk about financing undergraduate education for a student. I'm told that 80% of all undergraduates need financial aid, no matter whether they go to a big public institution or a private institution. And much of that money is coming from student loans, which in my opinion are dragging our consumer economy down to levels that are untold. There are more outstanding student loans than credit card loans, for example, and those loans cannot be discharged in bankruptcy, resulting in the fact that that people who graduate from college can't buy a refrigerator, and they can't buy a car, and they can't certainly buy a house. What would you do if some of the proposals to liberalize the discharge of student loans are enacted? It seems to me that universities have not had to face the economies that are necessary when their customer has to pay for it or can't come.
Fred, you're absolutely right. And let me say, think about this. If we have near $2 trillion worth of debt out there called student loans, and it goes the way of the housing crisis in 2008, we're going to have a bigger crisis than any of us have ever heard of. So we have to get our handle on this now. Now, what has happened is the fact that most universities have never faced, until recently, because all of a sudden the pinch is on, the reality of that they don't have enough students or not paying students. They've crossed those lines between paying and scholarship. So two things. One is the fact that you've got to work very hard to keep your tuition low. And secondly of all, you've got to make certain that you work equally hard to meet the needs of students through your public and your private support. And then third, some of these proposals are very wise, but I was indicating overall that just free for something is not going to take place. But we do have the potential of a bubble out there that could explode on us any minute.
We're just about out of time, so I would like to finish the story I was going to tell you at the very beginning about how Gordon Gee became the #1 fundraiser for Little Sisters of the Poor. And I'll provide the background, and you can. But Ohio State the football team was being considered for the football championship. There were 5 teams that could be in the Final Four. One of them was TCU, and Gordon said, TCU, we play a real schedule at Ohio State. TCU plays the Little Sisters of the Poor. About a week or two later, the receptionist in the president's office, and I happen to be standing there, calls me over. There's a phone call from a very, very gentle woman voice saying, would you please tell President Gee, this is Mother Superior, would you please tell President Gee that there is indeed a Little Sisters of the Poor order. We have nothing to do with football. We don't want to be associated with football. And we are located in Oregon, Ohio. So we deliver the message to Gordon, and the rest is history. What do you?
Yeah, well, I immediately went up. The Mother Superior was a wonderful person. She keeps sending me Dunning notes, I will say that much. And the second thing, of course, is that what we did is, remember, I invited him up.
We first called her, though.
Yeah, I called her, and then we went up and visited her. But we did invite all the sisters to a football game. They had a hell of a good time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I hope you found today's forum informative and entertaining. Let us thank our sponsors, Ology and Accenture. And our speakers, Gordon Gee and Herb Asher. And thanks to all of you for coming.